Hello everyone. My name is Admir Čavalić. I'm a professor doctor here at University in Tuzla, Bosnia Herzegovina, also an MP, and a long time one of the oldest free marketeers in the country. So it's really my pleasure to host and be moderator of the second session called Free Markets and Social Justice. Before I go to the session, I would just like to use this time to welcome you to Sarajevo again, to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And please, if you write papers, if you're interested in liberal topics and so on, I suggest you, I'm using this time to announce that, what I like to use Bosnia as a case study. Generally, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a highly decentralized country, one of the most decentralized countries in the world. We have Swiss cantons, we have something called entities, we have districts, we have state level government, we have municipalities, we have cities, we have everything. But what's interesting in a case like the liberal case, it's functioning actually, economically speaking, even better from some centralized eastern countries, sometimes like Serbia, Montenegro, Albania. They're like nationalist, centralized, one religion, one nation, and so on. But when you look at the economical figures, it's like worst or even like Bosnia, which is really interesting, like for researching and so on as a case study. Because usually people would say, Bosnia and Herzegovina is a failed state and so on. But if you look at the economical figures, Serbia has everything. They have one president, we have three presidents. They don't have cantons, they don't have entities. They have only one religion, majority, of course, they have Muslims in Sandžak and so on. But they're not going, the pace is not much faster than Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is like unique, and this is just my introduction, to give you like intellectual imagination to research that if you're in that field. Regarding free markets and social justice, I must say this is really interesting panel. Let me start being Hayekian, Hayek would say the mirage of social justice. Like he would like totally, deny the social justice in this panel. But I think times showed. I did lots of research regarding even corporate social responsibility, the market justice, and so on. I think practice showed that there's something of the concept of social justice. Maybe we think as liberal more on a market justice, market perspective of justice, but generally there's something that people perceive as social justice. So as I found out in these papers that will be discussed today, it's mostly like trying to find throughout cooperation, market exchange, private institutions, to understand the concept of social justice, which is great because I hope we all agree around this table that government cannot deliver social justice, and that's the true mirage of social justice as such, and so on. And I'm speaking as a politician here. So we have three papers: social justice throughout voluntary cooperation and market exchange. Mr. Ahmet Uzun, he's the first speaker. Welcome from Cumhuriyet University, Turkey. Guide me to the market, the role of Islamic social finance in promoting refugee entrepreneurship. Wahabalbari, Amir, Ahmed. Guide Me Academy, and who gets to say what's halal, Sharia boards as private governance and the liberty, problem of legitimacy in Islamic finance. We share the same name, Admir Mešković from International University of Sarajevo, our host here. So, I'm Slav, but I counted the time. 20 minutes is yours, Mr. Ahmed, yours, and after that we can have discussion.
Okay, thank you. Merhaba. I have prepared a study on this topic about 10,000 words. Here's I will try to abstract. The contemporary definition of social justice is fundamentally incompatible with the principles of justice in Islam. First argument in this Islamic conception of justice is rooted in the equality of rules rather than the equality of outcomes. Contemporary social policies founded through coercively extracted taxation led to a variety of negative outcomes, including economic inefficiency, creation of a culture of dependency, and the erosion of personal responsibility. For Islamic perspective, the path to true justice lies in the production and voluntary benevolence, ihsan, Islamic means, not in the forced distribution of wealth. What is Islamic justice? In Islam, justice, adl, or sometimes qist in Quranic terms, is synonymous with equilibrium and putting things in their rightful place. It is often defined as the antithesis of oppression or zulum. Justice requires equivalence in reciprocity, responding to good with good, and to evil with its evil. This is distance from ihsan, which entails responding to good with more than its equivalent. The Islamic concept of justice can be understood as the impartial application of rules ensuring that individuals don't violate another's rights. The absolute justice is comprehensible to reason, and it is essential for the preservation of social lives, irrespective of religious affiliation. I have adapted this approach from Gharib el-Isfahani, his famous book, Müfredat. When, like, 14, 14. yüzyıl tam hatırlayamadım.
13th century.
13th century, yeah.
14th century.
Another argument is that the liberal and Islamic intersection on rule-based justice. There are significant parallels between Islamic jurisprudence and classical liberal thought, specifically the ideas of Alban Herbert and Frederick Hayek. Herbert argues that justice requires not placing one person's burden onto another through coercion. The fundamental principle is that one group should not be forced to pay for what another group utilizes. Hayek's distinguish between two uses of justice. The first is justice regarding the rules of conduct. It dictates how individuals should behave and protects against the violation of rights. The second is just regarding the distribution of goods or distributive justice. Hayek argues that this second form has no place in a free society because it requires the state to consciously alter economic outcomes. Islamic scholarship about the topic. Islam aligned with Hayek's justice of rules, broadly distributing will to alter economic outcomes is considered contrary to justice because it involves the violation of property rights. Islamic scholars like Abu Yusuf, who argued that public projects benefiting specific groups should be funded by those groups, not general public revenues. This supports the broad arbitrary redistribution is illegitimate in Islamic thought. We argue that inequalities in income and wealth are inevitable in a free society due to difference in skill, luck, and nasib, divine luck. Quran acknowledges that Allah expands or restricts sustenance, rizq, for whom He wills, making inequality a natural part of divine tree, imtihan. This Ibn Qayyim endorses the approach. His book, Those Who Are Patient and Those Who Are Grateful. Ibn Qayyim, pupil of Ibn Taymiyyah.
Ibn Taymiyyah.
Değil mi?
In Ibn Taymiyyah's book.
Ibn Taymiyyah, yeah.
Yes.
We translated that.
The purpose of this inequality is to test individuals. The wealthy are tested on their religions to perform, in fact, voluntarily. If this charity is extracted by force, it loses its spiritual merit. The Quran rejects the idea that wealth is...
Do you change the shift?
Okay.
Yeah.
Slide.
I forgot. Excuse me. Wealth in honor or poverty in humiliation, rather they are instruments of testing. Fajr, Surah. True benevolence, higher, must be performed willingly. Actions based on coercive relationship cannot be considered true benevolence as explicitly stated in verses regarding those who spend their wealth without following it with inquiry. The rise of social justice from limited government to welfare state. While voluntary mutual aid has ancient roots, the concept of social justice based on state coercion is a product of the post-industrial revolution era. Philosophers like Rousseau and Amir addresses inequalities, but this shift towards social justice gained momentum with modern liberalism in the 19th century. The strengthening of the welfare state is linked to other reasons as well, but the idea of social justice has been a significant factor in its rise. This trend moved away from limited government to active state intervention in housing, healthcare, and education. Today, social justice has transformed into distributive justice, encompassing progressive taxation, subsidies, and extensive regulation. Biraz hızlanmam lazım.
Yüksek sesle söyleyin daha hızlı.
Daha mı doğru? Evet, biraz hızlanıyorum.
Yes, fast, daha faster.
On social justice, John Rawls versus Robert Nozick. Rawls provided the theoretical backbone for welfare state with his theory of justice as famous. He argued that inequalities are only acceptable if they benefit the less advantaged. This justifies taxing the wealthy to transfer resources to the poor. Robert Nozick argues that justice is based on entitlement. If the process of acquisition and transfer of property is just, then resulting distribution is just, regardless of the degree of inequality. Islamic alignment, this paper asserts that Nozick view is consistent to Islamic thought. Islam doesn't mandate an equality of outcomes that contradict natural difference in aptitude. The The injustice of result-based justice. In a free society, income reflects the subjective value individuals attribute to goods and services, not a moral judgment of value to society. Therefore, characterizing the market system as unjust is theoretically groundless. Furthermore, individuals aimed at equalizing outcomes inevitably lead to restriction of freedoms as seen in socialist regimes. The accumulation of power in the hands of government increases the risk of abuse and curtailment of liberties. Early Muslim philosophers like Tusi, Yusuf Hazari, and Iqbal also defined justice as distributing goods to those who deserve them, and legislation applied equally condemning unjust taxation and seizure of property through zulm. Economic case against mandatory redistribution. Inefficiency and economic waste. Redistribute policy significantly reduce economic efficiency. Rent seeking and chronic capitalism. When the state becomes the distributor of wealth, politics transforms into a battleground for rent seekers. Interest groups compete for specific privileges, subsidies, and regulation rather than focusing on productive competitiveness. Distribution of incentives and culture of dependency. State enforced social justice destroyed incentives. If the outcome is equalized regardless of effort, the motivation to work diminishes. Worse, it creates a culture of dependency. Knowledge problem and market signals. Intervention disrupts the signaling function of the market.
Last sentence is also important.
The alternative. Zor gelmeyince.
If moral obligations
okay.
are dictated
Ah,
by
okay,
individuals to
tamam, tamam. The efficiency of scope of private charity. Historical contemporary data suggests private charity is more efficient than state welfare. Private organizations are flexible, adaptable, and direct a higher percentage of funds to the actual cause. Global data in 2022, over 4.2 billion people helped strangers globally. In the US, despite a massive welfare state, private philanthropy remains robust, reaching $509 billion in 2024. A majority of Americans donate money and time voluntarily. A study of 71 causes in the US showed that private charities performed better than public institutes in 56 cases. However, Herbert argues that virtues like generosity can be only flourish in freedom. If moral obligations are directed by law, individuals turn into misers, according to him. A detailed historical analysis shows that Islamic societies achieved social security without the modern welfare state. Waqfs. The Seljuk and Ottomans established extensive works system. The wealthy voluntarily funded public service, food to the poor, infrastructure, and education. This functioned as a massive redistribution mechanism based entirely on voluntariness. The Ottoman sultans and wealthy citizens established works to feed the poor and unemployed, serving a critical social function. Futuva and Ekizim. This organization combined productive economic activity with social solidarity. The Aki system emphasized earning a halal living, mastering a craft, the helping one's brother, thus molding production into a philanthropic form. Great Muslim merchants often acted as guardian angels for the poor in medieval ages. The tradition of siyasetname, book of government, true, I'm not sure, advised rulers to govern with justice and generosity, reinforcing the culture of voluntary aid. Quranic mandate, Quran and Hadith incentivize voluntary infaq. Expanding this to a poor welfare state has no scriptural basis. In short, Quran commands justice and brotherhood, not equality. Ancient Greek poet Hesiod's wisdom, the half is more than the whole. Economically, for the whole of society, a similar slice of a growing pie is better than a larger slice of a shrinking one. The illicitity of state redistribution, interventions aimed at altering results, violate the principle of justice and lead to arbitrariness, favoritism, and eventually totalitarianism. From an Islamic perspective, heavy taxation to fund these activities is a form of zulm because it deprives individuals of their property rights and the spiritual reward of voluntary giving. I critique contemporary Muslim thinkers for two major errors. One, viewing the issue, that is social justice, purely as distribution. They fail to see that poverty elevation is best achieved through production-oriented growth based on justice and liberty, not coercive distribution. Two, endorsing a totalitarian state concept by assigning the state broad redistributive powers. They pave the way for repressive administrations. Justice is about respecting rights. It cannot be used as a tool for unlimited state power. This study makes a crucial distinction between justice and benevolence, or adl and ihsan. Justice requires equal treatment, respecting rights, and giving everyone their due based on rules. Ihsan and mercy requires giving without expectation for the sake of Allah to help those in need. This function must remain distinct. Mixing them by using the state to force charity harms the economy, corrupts morality, and fails to achieve through justice. The welfare state has hindered the development of organic, voluntary mutual aid systems that are more consistent with Islamic values. The solution lies in a limited state that enforces just rules while society addresses inequalities through voluntary, spiritual motivated benevolence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Exactly 20 minutes. So I'm opening the floor for any questions and discussion. Yes, Azim.
It was a very great convincing presentation. It was, I'm not sure, it might be Jason Brennan, one of the classical liberal libertarian younger economists. He was claiming that we should grasp the concept social justice over classical liberals, because it is a very good word, social justice, in creating social justice or reaching to social justice. But we are going to fill in that concept with however we believe in. So as Ahmet Uzun redefined, in classical Islamic understanding, it is the procedural justice, just like Hayek defined. The usul is important. We need to have an equality of the methods, equality of the procedures of usul, not the equality of outcomes. So if we define and make that case again, that reaching to real social justice through the usul, we can then make both the classical liberal case and Islamic case for social justice, because it has become a very popular and a kind of a divine end for the believers as well. And as this is a very important title that we need to work closely, because in our societies these are all basic arguments to be against markets, to be against private property, against entrepreneurial freedom. So we need to make that case. We cannot play God with public authorities, that claiming that we are going to reach an absolute result. So this mostly in our Muslim societies, Muslim communities, and religious governments, through their policies, intervening in markets and deciding how the individuals will do good through public decisions, actually intervening in a whole process. I think this is also an important issue, that we are making public authorities to play Allah's position, to create an absolute end for the sake of creating social justice. It is important to focus on this procedural justice under the name of social justice. That was what I was going to say. Thank you for the presentation. Too many points, issues, titles that we need to work and produce many articles on these titles. Inshallah.
If I just may add, like when we think about the term social justice, I think generally if we just eliminate the you know, the social.
Yes, justice
Yeah,
is
yeah.
an
We,
ideal. You're right, of
I
course.
think classical liberalism is all about justice. But when
Yes,
when
yes.
you put like social, I'm thinking even on our native tongues here in Bosnia, we say social justice. It's like socialism. It's social care. It's giving redistribution. It's like not procedures. It's like giving other people's money.
Yes.
So I think the social part of justice here is like confusing us all. And it's like when we think about justice, we're mostly thinking about, you know, Israeli Berlin, two freedoms like negative freedoms. We're thinking about negative procedural, like, you know, private property and so on. Not so much about positive freedoms, which is like social justice. And they think. But I agree on that totally. We need to reclaim the term. Anyone? Yeah, Professor.
A small contribution. First of all, I would like to take Dr. Uzun. I think that conceptually it is very clear,
Yeah.
meaningful, rational, understandable, and acceptable. Differentiating between equality, fairness, procedural justice with equality of outcomes, etc. In that regard, I came to the point to underline the difference between equality and equity, equality and fairness, equality and justice. Since the French Revolution, most of us are inclined to think about equality is something good, something a good value, something to be appreciated, something like that. So it is important in that regard to differentiate between four different kinds of equality. Number one, equality before God. All individuals are equals in terms of dignity, in terms of value. Fine, no problem. Equality before law. This is part of the rule of law. So the law, the state, the government should treat all the citizens equally in terms of their basic individual freedoms, rights. Okay? So it's equality of, equality before law is okay.
Yeah.
Equality of opportunity is also okay. That means all the citizens should be able to reach the public services provided by government or the state, whatever. But when it comes to the last one, equality of outcomes, this is something bad, this is something injustice, this is something unfair, this is against nature. Because if God, if Allah wanted us to be equal in every sense, He could have created equally. So, inequality or differences are natural and as part of the test. If life is a test on earth, okay, if there is a good reason for the hell and the heaven to be created out there, there must be inequality somehow because we are different in characteristics, different in abilities, inclination to work harder, creativity, innovation capacity, etc., etc. So it is against from the justice and natural order to defend equality of outcomes. So we should reject it while defending the other three types of equality. Thank you.
Before Ali, just to say, like I mentioned, I'm an MP. Like in political, battleground, it's really hard to be against equality of outcomes from the position of politicians. It's really because the people are demanding equality of outcomes. Ali.
Yeah, Mr. Ahmed, great presentation. So, you have explained that the social justice from two different perspectives. We understand that social justice from a statist point of view, a wealth distribution point of view, appears in the form of taxation. I'm wondering, if we were to think about institutional manifestations of social justice in the sense that, in Islamic sense, or you also mentioned critique of critique. So, what would be the institutional forms? How can we implement these ideas in today's world?
Konusu olarak sosyal güçlendirmekle olacak bir şey herhalde bu devletin azaltılması ve piyasanın büyütülmesi değil mi?
Eşitsizliklerin azaltılmasını ya da sosyal adaleti kurumsal olarak hani böyle özgürlük düşüncesiyle çatışmadan acaba nasıl biraz geliştirebiliriz?
Siz söylemiş için.
Vakıf, tarihte vakıf örnekleri var. Amerika'da 1 milyondan fazla vakıf var. Amerika'da. Yani Amerika gibi bir ülkede 1 milyon vakıf olduğu zaman yani Müslüman bir toplumda bunun çok çok daha fazlası olması lazım. Bu bir. İki, Osmanlılar bu vakıfsız zaten yani hayırları kurumsal bir temele oturtmuşlar. Yani vakıflar eliyle düzenli olarak işsizler, yoksullar. Hatta Osmanlılar kamu vakıfları kurdular. Kamu yani bir takım devlet gelirlerini düzenli bir şekilde bu vakıflara tahsis ettiler. 19. yüzyılda İstanbul topraklarının 1/3 vakıftı. Vakıflara aitti. Yani bu kadar geniş bir şey.
Çok değil mi o?
Ya işte vakıf bu kadar geniş bir medeniyet. Yani vakıf bir de sadece zenginler değil, bir hanesi, bir evi olanlar da var. Yani onu bir çeşmenin kirası, bir çeşmenin şeyine bağışlıyor. Yani çok geniş bir kültür. Artı ahilik üretim faaliyetleriyle hayır faaliyetlerinin iç içe geçmesinin bir örneğini veriyor zaten. Ahilik kârı dışlamıyor. Kârı dışlamıyor. Kâr edeceksin. Şey var, rekabet de var belli ölçüde ama şeye devam ediyor yani.
Başka bir ülke var mı ahiliği şey yapan?
Ahilik bütün İslam
Osmanlı,
dünyasında var.
İslam.
Selçuklu'da var, Abbasilerde var.
Ha, Abbasiler.
Tabii Abbasilerde de var. Aynı felsefe. Bunu özellikle müsteşrikler Andrea Miguel gibi, işte Maurice Lombard gibi onlar bu konuda çok detaylı çalışmalar yapmışlar. Yani İslam dünyasının bir vakıf medeniyeti, bir hayır medeniyeti olduğuna dair. Dolayısıyla bunlar zaten kurumsal bir temel. Yani kurumdan sadece devlet şeyini anlamamamız lazım. Yani tabii devlet vakıfları kontrol ediyor. O manada bir kurumsal denetim de var. Dolayısıyla devletsel şeyler anlamamak lazım. Bu zaten tarihte hep kurumsal bir temelde olmuş.
Yani devletin zenginden alıp fakire dağıtmak gibi aktif müdahaleci politikasından ziyade bu işi sivil topluma gönüllü faaliyetlere bırakmak değil mi hocam?
Daha önemli bir şey söyleyeyim. İsterseniz
Instead,
bunları
let
bir
me
atlayın.
translate what you have
Artık
said.
ben size bir iki önemli şey daha söyleyeceğim.
So when you mention institutions, we need to understand civil society organizations other than public institutions. As he has stated in his presentations, there are more than 1 billion wakfs, foundations in US. Now my idea, my comment here is indeed US is based on these civil organizations. When we look at US, we see the governmental organizations, but what makes US, United States strong is actually these foundations, and he also addresses that this is United States of America and there are more than 1 million wakfs. If Muslim countries, he says, claim that they are for social justice, there should be more wakfs in Muslim societies. However, we already have this heritage in Islamic history, he says. Ottomans established wakfs and even public wakfs, and in Istanbul, once 1/3 of Istanbul was constituted of wakfs. The private properties have been established under the name of wakfs. Even a family could institute a wakf. So its property is protected under the civil law of wakf within the Ottoman law. So not only Ottoman, before the Selçuk Empire, the Abbas Empire as well. Thirdly, the Ahi civil organization. The Ahi civil organization is a kind of a chamber of medium-sized industry and commerce. And this AHI organization did not exclude hire. AHI combined production and hire together, profit and hire together. Did not exclude neither profit or hire or charity. So AHI was an organization of combining profit and charity. During Abbasi, Seljuk and Ottoman times, this AHI structure was used, and there are several philosophers who had studied this organization. All of what he has said, let me stop here. There's one more sentence that you would like to add.
Yeah. In economic terms, I think he underlined the fact that instead of government intervening into the market and taking from the rich and then giving it to the poor, active redistribution function of the government. Instead of this, government can promote voluntary charity organizations like Vakıf foundations, and that redistribution could have handled in a much better way, both theoretically and practically.
Thank you.
I think here it is something that we are not here to reinvent new institutions for Muslim societies. We just need to look at early Islamic history, which protected private property system. Within a private property system, we already had a tradition for charity, for justice.
Yeah.
Çalışmada bu tezlerini de anlatıyorum zaten.
Bir şey daha ekleyeceğim.
Yeah.
Çok ciddi şekilde
Mazen, you want to say?
devlet müdahalesi, bu yeni
Yeah.
şeyleri.
I mean, I'm a believer in the free market system, and I'm a believer in low taxation to promote economic growth. That goes without saying. Some Islamic scholars say, most of them, if not all of them, say that zakat is enough as a tax, if you want to look at it as a tax. And here we have two issues. One issue is I am for getting the government out of anything outside the legal system to promote justice and defense, internal and external, army and police. Now, even that, today's armies are different from yesteryear's armies. You could arm a whole army with swords and shields and whatever with a lot less money. I mean, with the price of one fighter jet, probably you can arm China with that. So the idea, I think we have to keep that in mind. Sticking to 5% taxation. Now, we have the ihsan issue also, with the world moving into secularism. The word ihsan and its religious meaning, I think it's losing its impact by itself. I'm asking questions, I'm not giving answers. It's a paradox. So I don't know, frankly, what we should do about it. Yes, I am for lower taxation, and I think, firsthand, the truth is somewhere in between. You cannot take 5% taxation as, okay, well, that's what Islam said, and it was working then. Well, we're not then. They had no banks anyway. So, am I for making free education to everybody? Absolutely not. It should not be free. It's a privilege. It's not a right. Am I for guaranteeing retirement for everyone, whether they worked or not worked? Absolutely not. They need to move their behind to work and earn it. But am I for dumping really needy people in the streets? Really needy. The word really meaning somebody who got hurt while trying to do the right thing, not somebody who likes to smoke argile, half the day and the other half smoke cigarette, whatever. So I find this a bit of a challenge, and we need to address it in a way that maintains the essence, the heart of promoting goodwill and promoting work and productivity, because higher taxation hinders that, and while at the same time, so it's a paradox. Frankly, that's how I see it. Thank you.
Reducing poverty through higher production, growth, economic growth, innovation, and producing more goods and services.
To do what?
To alleviate the poverty instead of redistributive.
I am 100% for that. I'm 100% for that. But again, how much of it? How much? This is something to be discussed. Actually, I'm not saying I have the answer. I said I have the question, not the answer.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have some more comments, Mr. Dr. Ahmed?
Eklemek istediğiniz arada konuşabiliriz.
Okay, thank you so much for this great presentation and for the paper. We now go to the second speaker, Wahabalbari, Amir Ahmed from Guide Me.
We started 15 minutes earlier.
Okay.
So we stopped 15 minutes earlier. Edo says.
Okay, we're following Edo. So Guide Me to the Market, the role of Islamic social finance in promoting refugee entrepreneurship. Ali is okay, Ali. So please, yeah.
He hit the
Okay.
So the pointer is with you.
Yes, just a second. Here we
So
go.
how to move it? Just up and down, huh?
Yeah. Right, left. Okay. Please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.
So thank you very much for having me today here in this lovely city of Sarajevo. I remember Sarajevo, I remember Bosnia when I was young, so everyone was talking about it, especially in the 1992. So finally, I'm in Sarajevo, free Sarajevo, mashallah. I'm very lucky actually to be after Professor Ahmet Uzun, because I think there's a link between his paper on social justice and also this paper. Because this paper, as you can see, social finance, or Islamic social finance in the search for the refugee entrepreneur, guide me to the market. Always the title has a meaning, the title has a story. So, guide me to the market. What is actually the term? From where it was originated? It was originated from the time of the Hijrah, when the Prophet, peace be upon him, has done the Hijrah, or has migrated from Mecca to Medina to establish the state of Medina, where they can practice their religion freely. So most of the muhajirin, the migrants who moved from Mecca, they lost everything almost. And most of the Prophet, peace be upon him, companions, Abu Bakr Siddiq, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Zubair ibn Awam, all these companions, they were very rich, they were millionaires actually, and they were famous merchants in Mecca. So they have left everything. So then when they moved to Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, okay, now I'm going to form a solidarity scheme, ukhuwa. Okay, ukhuwa, like ukhuwa, a solidarity scheme between al-muhajirin and al-ansar. Okay, so that's why I'm just using the word ukhuwa, okay, because it was mentioned actually in the first presentation. So Rasulullah, akha means form a brotherly relationship or brotherhood between companions. And specifically in this case, he formed that kind of brotherhood between al-Muhajir, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, radiallahu anhu, and al-Ansari, Sa'd ibn Rabi'a. So Sa'd ibn Rabi'a is from the local, from the Ansar. Abdurrahman ibn Auf is al-Muhajir. Then Sa'd ibn Rabi'a, he said, okay, now I'm wealthy, I'll give you half of my wealth to start your life here in Medina. Then Abdurrahman ibn Auf mentioned to him, said to him, thank you very much, Barakallahu lak fi malik, okay, may Allah bless your wealth, guide me to the market. So that actually dullani ala suq, okay?
That's actually the story.
That's very important. Guide me to the market.
Guide me to the market. Okay. That's why actually I choose this title. Guide me to the market. Islamic social finance in the search for the entrepreneur. Now, because I just want to link it with the Prophet Ahmet Uzun on social justice. The Prophet, peace upon him, as a leader, now he is in his capacity as a leader, not as a prophet. He formed that kind of scheme of brotherhood between the local, the Ansar, and the Muhajirin. So the leader has gave the instruction. The citizens, they implemented, they obey. So here, 100% social justice. Now, here is actually now the point now. So we are in the 21st century. I'm coming from the UK. I'm originally from Eritrea, Habsistan, born in Saudi Arabia. Okay. Finally, I have to find a country where I can settle. Because I was born in Saudi Arabia, then I went back to my country, Eritrea. Unfortunately, because of the war, we have to find a country that we can just call it home. I went to the UK, and I'm very fortunate, actually. I went to the UK, I was very ready. Straight away, okay, I integrated into the system, I worked as a university lecturer, so I was very fortunate. But not all people who went to the UK, they were quite fortunate. So if you think about the UK government, they have very good legal system. When an asylum seeker comes and knocks the door, he say, I'm seeking refuge, seeking protection. The government, the state, they will follow the process. They will interview them. Once they find out that he is actually a genuine refugee, they grant them the status. They call it the refugee status. So when they are refugee, in this case, you are not actually, you are having the same status as a British citizen, no difference. You have the right to work, you have the right of everything like a British citizen, except voting. But in our life, in most of the refugees, they never actually voted in their home country, so it doesn't really mean anything to them. So now the government has accepted them. Okay, you have the same right, nobody will touch you, nobody will deport you. You are free to live as a UK citizen. However, once they give you the right to work, now the government, the state, they say, okay, this individual has a right to work, has a right to live. Now it's up to the society, up to the companies, up to the organizations to employ them. Now the question is, did they follow the same concept of Saad ibn Rabi'a, saying that, okay, come, we give you opportunity to work? Some of them, yes. Many of them, yes. But also equally many of them, they refuse. So there is actually a mismatch here. So the government is saying, yes, employ them, integrate them. The society, maybe they were criminals. They were not genuine. That actually is a question that we ask now. The question of the social justice. Okay, social justice now. Now the question of whether the society will accept them or not? That actually is back to the social justice. So that actually is what Abdurrahman al-Auf mentioned. Guide me to the market. Okay, that's very straight. And then Abdurrahman al-Auf, when he passed away, he actually left 8 million dinar. He was one of the richest merchants in the Medina community at the time. Okay? Now, when we have to talk about the pluralism, a pluralistic perspective. So pluralism, okay, when two lines are parallel, they will not intersect. So mostly they will go in the same direction. But here in this question here, in this issue that we have here, in the context of the UK, you will find that there is always, nowadays, especially when there is economic crisis, if you open like mainstream British media, always, every day they talk about the boat, the migrants, send them back. Okay? So always you have that kind of debate, okay, of reducing refugees, reducing migrants, sending them back. Okay? So that actually reflects, okay, the mismatch between actually what actually the policy of the government says, and how actually the societal organizations they do. So there is always that kind of identity conflict between the two. Okay? So because these people are different, they are strange, they are not like us. So that actually is always common in the media. Okay? So there's a mistrust between the communities. So now here is the issue now comes, the employment barriers. That's why before we talk about refugee entrepreneurship, we have to talk about what actually made them actually to become entrepreneur. Because always when they come, they face this paradox, the experience trap. You come there, you are an engineer, you are a mechanic from back home. Then they say to you, okay, but you don't have UK experience. We only employ people who have UK experience. That's actually what they do, actually. So many of them, they come with qualifications, but unfortunately because of that, they can't actually get the employment, the job, simply because they have the UK qualification, the UK experience. Equally also, they have the same issue. Even if they have the experience to some extent, they will say to them, also, you don't have a UK qualification. So there is always issue. And if they want to accept them, they will say, okay, but we are not sure whether you have the right to work, despite that actually the government has already given them the right to work. So that actually is a barrier, okay, that for so many refugees coming, for example, to the UK, of facing or in this trap of unemployment. So basically, in order now to understand the issue, you have sometimes to interview some of the respondents. And who did we interview actually? So basically, this is actually a working paper. It's not yet finished. So basically, we interviewed. Let me just do here. I can actually, yeah. So as you can see, I'm going to look at my laptop and also just do the same thing. So basically, you will look at the literature. So most of the literature, when they speak about refugees, they speak from an outsider perspective. But in order to know, or in order to dig deeper into the real issue, sometimes you need to conduct some primary research and interview these refugees. And in my interview, I have interviewed those people or those refugees who came actually to the UK in the past 10 years, who have been living in the UK in the past 10 years. And mainly they are from Syria, Sudan, and Eritrea. Why? Because these three communities, mostly when they come to the UK, most likely they will receive or they will get the, what they call it, the refugee status because of the condition of their countries back home. So you will find this issue always, okay, when we interviewed them, we found out that, okay, because we have to be very selective in our interview, so these are some of the voices of the interviews, voices of some of the people who were interviewed. They say there are plenty of jobs, but every time they reject us, okay, because we don't have a UK experience. So for example here, there are plenty of jobs, but every time they reject my application because I don't have a UK experience. I did an accounting job in Sudan, but the employers here don't recognize them. Another interviewee from Eritrea, I'm looking for a car mechanic work, which I used to do in Eritrea. What stops me is a lack of qualification in the UK experience. I mainly apply through agencies, but they ask me always to apply, but I don't know how to apply online. Even though if he apply online, they actually don't respond to him positively. So here actually now the additional obstacles, employer hesitancy. So there is always that kind of stereotype. Okay, if they see their ID, oh, you are a refugee, we are not sure whether you have the right to work here. And always there is that kind of mismatch, sector mismatch. Okay, so where you have that refugee often cannot find work in their trained professions, so they accept a very low type of job, which is not actually much with their experience in their trainings. So if you can see here now, you find that the initial employment, so when they start, although even if they have qualifications, even if they have experience in back home, so they start with a warehouse, most of the jobs there in the warehouse because it doesn't require qualification. So they work through agency, and then sometimes they lose the job for some reasons. Then what they do, they become unemployed. Later on, they think about an idea, okay, why don't we just start, because in the UK it's a friendly country for opening a business, so they save money, and then they open maybe a small grocery, okay? And that's actually how they start the entrepreneurship journey. So they start the business, but it is very small. So in order to grow the business, they need capital. But here the issue comes. There is a lack of capital. Okay? Lack of capital. Why? Because many of them, if they are Muslim, most of them they are Muslims, they can't actually take a loan because of the interest rate, or even they can't actually, even if they want to take some kind of loan, they will not be eligible, okay, for that type of loan. So that's actually for growth requirement. They need, for example, like one of them, he opened a grocery shop. When I interviewed him, he said, I need financial capital so far so that I can buy in bulk or large quantities. Initially, we use our saving to open up this grocery shop, but we need capital to grow. However, we didn't take a loan because we don't want to pay interest, as it's not allowed in our religion. So they need bulk purchasing capability, expanded storage facilities, comparative pricing strategies, non-interest financing option. So here is the issue now that we have in the UK. The UK actually, they wanted to be the center of Islamic finance in the Western world. So they want to say, look, outside the Muslim world, London is the center of Islamic finance. And they hosted actually the Islamic Economics Forum in 2013. And in 2021, the Bank of England introduced a liquidity non-interest facility which can facilitate Islamic banks to borrow from the Bank of England without interest. So most of the attention about Islamic finance, actually, it is much more directed towards the banking sector. But there is a missing element here, which is actually the NGO. We are going to talk about it, and thanks to Prof. Ahmet Uzun, because he spoke about the waqf. We will talk about it shortly. But what I want to mention here, in this presentation here, so mainly it is the UK experience barrier, credential recognition, in entrepreneurial spirit, that actually what push refugees into entrepreneurship. So here's the journey. They start warehouse work, then they lose the job, then family partnership, basically they save money, okay? And then they start to open a grocery or to open a business, but because of lack of funding, they can't grow. Okay? So here now, we talk about financial exclusion. So basically they are excluded because the banks will not lend them money, okay? Because of the interest rate, or they don't want to take a loan because of the interest rate. However, even if they want to take a loan, the bank actually will exclude them because they don't fulfill the criteria. So introducing Islamic social finance. Now we talk about Islamic social finance. So Islamic social finance, when you talk about Islamic social finance in a very easy way, because I know that most of the participants here, they are not coming from Islamic finance background. Mostly when you talk about Islamic social finance, you talk about zakah, sadaqah, qard al-hasan, waqf. Zakah, sadaqah, qard al-hasan is mostly for like an immediate humanitarian appeal, okay? But the waqf instrument, which is Islam has actually heritage, okay? It is like there is an Islamic heritage of waqf, which is not really invested, or which is not really evolved and developed in our contemporary time. And Islamic finance doesn't pay much more attention to waqf as compared to the banking in the capital market. So the waqf actually is one of the instruments that actually which can be considered one of the most effective instruments in Islamic social finance. And why Waqf? Why NGOs? Because mostly Waqf, it will be effective if it is delivered through a non-government organizations. Because a non-government organization, it's a civil organization, it is a voluntary, okay? It's not forced, so the government actually gives them that kind of delegation to actually, so that's why I used from a classical liberal perspective. I'm sorry, but the text was very small. I thought maybe it will be bigger, but I'm sorry for that apology. So from a classical liberal perspective, Islamic social finance embodies voluntary cooperation. It mobilizes private resources through ethical commitment rather than state compulsion, making it highly compatible with pluralist societies. I'm going to go very quick, okay, because I know that time is not in my hand, but the whole idea is with you now. So we will just go through this. So start with initial capital, Waqf endowment, private startup, which is actually very effective. Then we go to the business growth, that actually will give them ongoing support from Waqf revenue, enable expansion, equipment purchase in market development, so that is through cash Waqf. Community investment, okay, in that actually successful business contributes back to Waqf fund, creating a sustainable cycle of entrepreneurial support, and that actually will lead into social integration. I know the time is very short, but what I will do, just we'll go to the implications and recommendations very quick. Policy integration, NGO policy integration with the government, which actually the UK government is doing already. They have good policy for refugee integration. Now we need the NGO collaborations. When we talk about the NGO, also we include the Islamic NGOs. We have the largest Islamic NGOs in the UK, like of Islamic Relief, Human Appeal, many of them actually. We have many of them, but we don't see many of them using the concept of Waqf or the instrument of Waqf, which is actually a powerful instrument of Islamic social finance, Waqf development, and also research expansion. So that's what actually I mentioned: policy integration, NGO collaboration, Waqf development, and research expansion. So I will try to end, because I'm in Bosnia. I remember yesterday. That's why I was late in sending the slides, because I want to include this successful example of refugee entrepreneurship in the UK. Can you read there? Bosnia House, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this actually two institutions were established by a refugee entrepreneur. The refugee entrepreneur, he came as a refugee in 1992 to the UK during the war here. So he fled to the UK. His name is Farid in the black blue jacket. Okay. So actually he opened the Bosnia and Herzegovina Center in Derby, and then he actually opened the Bosnia House, which is one of the successful example of refugee entrepreneurship, okay, in the UK. So refugees are not only beneficiaries, they are institutions builders. So he built an institution. So he's a Bosnian, his name is Farid, okay, and I recommend that if you come to the UK, you visit the Bosnia House, okay. So yes, so this is actually a very successful example of refugee entrepreneurship in the UK from Bosnian refugee entrepreneur. And I want to finish with this Quranic verse, which actually summarizes everything. والذين تبوأوا الدار والذين هاجروا نعم والذين تبوأوا للفقراء الذين أخرجوا من ديارهم وأموالهم يبتغون فضلا من الله in Surah Al-Hashr. Okay, I think I wrote in English. And also for those who were forced to leave their homes and wealth, seeking the bounty of Allah and His pleasure, Muhajirin. And the Ansar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised them in the Quran. And it's also for those who before them had settled in the city and embraced the faith. They love those who immigrate to them, finding no want in their hearts for what the migrants are given. والذين تبوأوا الدار والإيمان يحبون من هاجر إليهم ولا يجدون في صدورهم حاجة مما أوتوا. This is the Quranic verse. So I want just to finish by saying the dignity of the displaced, honor and self-reliance, responsibility of host communities, true success through solidarity. Refugees are honored, hosts are tested, in society succeeds together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed. So I'm opening floor, and thank you for the example of Bosnian House. We had lots of refugees, especially in 1993. That was the worst year. And I was thinking, like, lots of them went to UK. I think they got quite well integrated.
Yes, yeah.
But mostly from here, Germany was actually the land that most Bosnian went. Bosnians liked the joke, so even they made the joke about that. They said, what would Bosnian guy do if the judgment day comes, you know, Kiamet, and the joke says like he will go to Germany. They will know what to do. So, yeah. So please, let's open the floor for questions. Yes.
First, I appreciate that research. It's interesting, but I think there is you spoke about the obstacles against employment of refugees by locals. First of all, I think this extends beyond Muslims, beyond refugees. It extends to everybody who comes into the country. There is one controlling factor that I didn't see you addressing, and I think, with my humble knowledge about markets and about businesses, being an employer myself of thousands of people over the years, it's government intervention in price fixing labor. When I have somebody coming in with not enough experience in the UK, using your example, and the government is forcing me to pay him the same as the other ones, then I am going to be more selective. This factor was not addressed.
If there is no profit,
So it's
there is
not
no
really the
employment.
viciousness of people, of not hiring, but the guy is not as productive as the other guys, and that explains why they get employed often, starting with the warehouse, because warehouse requires not much communication. Oftentimes their language barrier is there, and that usually has the lowest pay in the, they cannot pay him as a qualified engineer, even if he were an engineer in his home country. It's a dilemma, but I think if they free up the job market from price fixing, then people would hire them and invest in them. You know, I can hire an experienced engineer who's coming from another country as a junior engineer, and he will accept it because he's looking to make a job, to make a living with dignity. He doesn't want to have a handout. Most of them hate it when they have handout from the government. So, but this factor, it's a controlling factor of the whole argument, I think.
Okay,
Yep.
should I answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, basically, it is maybe in the US it's different, okay, or in the UK it's a totally different story. In the UK, actually, there are some jobs. There are jobs which are designated or designed for people who don't have documents. There are some jobs for that, okay? Because the
Legal
locals
jobs or illegal jobs?
jobs that actually it's a legal fancy restaurant, beautiful restaurant, charging higher prices. But if you go inside the kitchen, you will see mainly people who are actually couldn't find the job in the formal sector. So that's why they are working there. Okay? So in terms of price fixing, that is actually something very tricky. They don't often discuss it there in the UK. However, there's a hidden economy. There's a hidden economy in the UK. Okay? And unfortunately, the government actually, the reason why they want actually to promote refugee employment is to actually fight this type of sector, because what that leads into exploitation, and that's why in the UK, a UK employer, if he wants to employ, he will say, I need somebody who have a UK experience. That could be something, a soft, if you may allow
Because
me,
they are forced to pay the same price.
a soft discrimination, which is discrimination is illegal. But if you say you don't have a UK experience, is a soft discrimination, indirect discrimination to say no, I don't want to employ you. However, some companies, they like to hire someone who is very experienced, but they don't want to give them a formal contract, permanent contract. They give them hourly paid. No, it's legal in the UK. They give them hourly paid. They say, okay, we can have you, but in contract. Does the contract finish? You have completed the work, that's it. There is no permanent job. Because in the UK, it's totally different than the US. The US, I think, it's very easy to hire, it's very easy to fire.
Yes.
In the UK, no. In the UK, no. It's very difficult to fire.
That's intervening in market forces.
Yes, to fire
exactly
a permanent employee. So in the UK now, nobody can fire me. Okay, if I haven't done something, if I don't finish my contract, nobody can fire me. They expect that the government expect that I will continue working until retirement, in paying tax. Because when you terminate a permanent employee, it means that there's a loss for the government because they are losing taxes, isn't it? And then that person will become burden to the exchequer. So that's why in the UK it's a different scenario. It's mainly most of the refugees, they work in agencies. They don't work in warehouses. The warehouses, they say, we deal with you agency. We have a contract with the agency. You bring for us refugees. Okay. If you want to bring to us asylum seekers, refugees, it's your responsibility. You are the one who is doing the HR. It's not us. It's a little bit complicated in a different scenario.
I think 90% of it has to do with you don't see the situation in the Gulf region because there's no minimum wage.
Yeah.
Everybody is employed.
Yes. Yeah.
Depends on their productivity and market price.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
When you say price fixing, are we talking about the minimum wage or you are referring something else?
Price fixing, I have...
Master, like minimum wage is also price, minimum wage.
Yes.
Minimum wage, we're speaking about minimum wage. That's also price
When you
fixing.
say price fixing, are we talking about minimum wages or you are referring to something else? Because in my country, there is no price fixing.
There is no.
There is minimum wages, but there is no price fixing. So you can pay more than...
Well, minimum wage is price fixing in economic terms. You have a price floor that you cannot go below. That's price fixing.
But
I just want to make clear this one. But minimum wages are really minimum. So if we talk about dignity and other stuff, you should pay more than minimum wage.
But who decides what's
I don't want to take up the time of the floor, so I have answered.
Yeah.
Minimum wages are really minimum.
Okay, the
For
follow-up.
instance, in my country, it's
Like,
It's not.
Sweden, Switzerland, and Denmark, they don't have a legal minimum wage, and I don't see people complaining there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. If there's no minimum wage, then you pay.
Then market will market lifts the wages. So yeah.
Okay. One of the universal laws of economics tells there is unintended consequences of market intervention. And a typical example is this price fixing under the name of minimum wages. Most of the time, market intervention hurts most whose are intended to be protected at the first place. Government tries to protect whom? The unskilled labor. No experience, no foreign language, no technical capacity, etc., etc. But you have to pay at a certain level, minimum wage. Then the boss had to recalculate, is there going to be a profit or not? Then the first person who is going to lose his job is this unskilled person whom the law is trying to protect. So there is unintended consequences of market intervention.
Let me give you just one example of that. So in Bosnia Herzegovina, I work with women's groups who protect women who are victims of domestic violence. So my job, and that's like some kind of my charity as a professor, I teach those women how to be more entrepreneur and how to be more competitive on the labor market. 2 years ago, we were able to have like 20 of those women employed by employers, private sector employers, and they're like highly risky workforce because sometimes husband unfortunately come to the workplace, makes trouble and so on. So they're not so much easy employment, and sometimes they leave. So the government raised by 61% minimum wage. Right now we have the record in Europe. And you know what happened? From those 20 women, only 2 of them stayed working. And I have a clear data on that.
Unemployment.
And now, yeah, they got fired. Yeah.
If I may. I mean, the minimum wages are introduced by politicians. And politicians are not known to be very ethical people. So by them saying...
I'm not offended.
By them saying this is in order to help the poor classes, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, it doesn't mean they're doing it in order to help the poor classes. So us debating, is it helping the poor classes or not, is a little bit irrelevant. We know, as most of us are from economics, these are barriers of entry. Usually why politicians will do that, not because they're interested in marginalized groups of populations, but they will do it because of higher interests. Big companies, as for example you are, actually minimum wages are in your favor, hypothetically, because they are preventing other entrances, new entrepreneurs, women entering the businesses. Out of the 2016 went out. So new competition is being eradicated, the established players are stabilizing itself in the market, so we actually do not know what is the real motivation behind these policies. Officially, of course, they will not tell you, the public, we want to exploit you and prohibit you from entering businesses. No, we do this because we want to help the poor. But what is the real motivation? I don't know.
Let me give you, I'm against that, but let me give you the real motivation. So if you raise the minimum wage,
the tax base is increasing.
Yes, but the unions in public sector, they increase the wage in public sector. So, but why? Because they're using minimum wage as a, some mean for raising the wage in public sector. Exactly. So public sector employee who are good voters, they're happy with you.
So that's what I want to comment is, we're like, it's like the poor are asking for, no, the poor are actually being manipulated. They're being abused in order to justify policies which are being implemented by politicians for whatever reasons are in the background. Another thing which we mentioned when it comes to, guide me to the market, and we're coming again back to the policies. We are not analyzing these requests in a context of access to markets. We are analyzing about these requests from a perspective of people who do not have access to the markets. And there are a lot of barriers which are already there in practice, which prevent the establishment of market processes. And in this kind of difficult situation, the human mind needs to survive, and of course he's looking for avenues, he's looking for solutions how to survive. If you cannot do it through guiding to the market, then give me social insurance. Then give me whatever. I have to survive, I have to pay my bills somehow. So I think we need to be a little bit more, we need to go a little bit deeper into the analysis about all of these requests, because we have a large amount of population who are really struggling to live, not because they do not want to work, it's not because they do not want to go to the market, it is because we have institutionalized a mechanism which is not really human friendly. And this is what we need to take into account when we're analyzing these kind of...
That's the point. I didn't address the minimum wage because they are not working. So there's no point to address the minimum wage if they are not working. No, I mean the refugees, the barriers to employment, they can't find the job despite that they are experienced, they are skilled. Like for example, you have some people from Syria, very experienced doctors. Yeah. They end up working, for example, general work, reception, translator. It's a common job, okay, just to translate, because they can't actually access the market because of this kind of institutional requirement. Not the government say employ them, empower them, but the institutions, as I mentioned, in the UK, okay, be a doctor, be whatever, okay, they want something experienced. Have you done it in the UK? Yes? Okay, let's now talk. Let's look at your qualification then. If you haven't done it in the UK, then you have to secure a UK experience. And that's a problem in the UK. When we were in Malaysia, actually, always you find people that say, oh, I have an international experience. In the UK, people, they will not say international experience. They say, no, I'm here. I was born and bred in the UK. Okay? This is a brand, okay? I was born, bred, educated, studied, experienced in the UK. Because if they say international, it So they have that kind of
Downgrade.
okay? So that's the point. The minimum wage is another actual paper, okay? It's a very interesting topic, okay? But
And I have one more question before.
Right.
Yes, surprisingly, I have a
In
question.
UK, surprising no, in the UK.
Yeah. With the wakaf, now no one is preventing us to have wakafs. We get all the tax benefits of establishing wakafs. So the really practical question is, why don't we have them? What has stopped? I'm sitting next to Mazum, so where are the wakafs?
Who is managing what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you appoint them, right? The one who is establishing the wakafs.
Public sector,
right? No, wakaf, private wakafs. I'm talking about.
Well, it's run like public sector.
I'm not sure.
Nationalized.
So he,
Nationalized. But for nationalized.
no, that was long time ago. In Bosnia also, I mean here in Yugoslavia, when we had the socialist government, they basically nationalized all the wakafs. Okay, that is the past, it happened, it was nationalized, that is over. But what is preventing us from starting new wakafs? Exactly right.
Yeah.
So what is preventing people?
that's the problem. The waqf is actually underutilized. In the Prof. Thanks to Prof. Ahmed, honestly, that paper actually came at the right time because waqf itself, it's been reduced to build to just like charity. So even in the UK, we have the very large Islamic NGOs in the Muslim world, not only in the UK, in the Muslim world, and yet they treat waqf as donations. But waqf is not meant for donation. Waqf is designed for sustainable, to ensure that kind of sustainable living. Okay? So people, they don't actually take charity. They don't accept donation because you cannot accept donation forever. That's why in Turkey, even in the Seljuk time, I always like to watch historical series. So I was watching this series about the rise of Seljuk. Okay, Malik Shah. Okay? So Malik Shah, what he said, one of the Seljuk great leader before the Ottoman, he said before building the masjid, we should establish the waqf. Look how the concept was of the waqf from that time.
You should be what? Before
We shouldn't
Waqf
build the
before
masjid.
First
We
one
should
of that
waqf.
masjid.
Waqf before the masjid.
Yeah.
That's why if I go to Bursa, for example, you find all these local bazaars. Many of them they are waqf to maybe at the time to fund the Ulu Jami, the big Jami in Bursa, okay? Or most of the big Jami's in Turkey, most of them they are surrounded by the waqf because it shows how the Ottoman actually they actually developed the concept of waqf and even cash waqf. But unfortunately, after the fall of the Ottoman Khilafah, it seemed that the waqf was reduced into just like, even in Saudi Arabia, for example, they call it the Ministry of Awqaf. Okay? Just, you hear that the word, the Ministry of Awqaf, but what is Awqaf? How Awqaf can actually make, because Awqaf is designed to provide sustainable finance to organizations such as mosque, education sectors, education institutions, hospitals, even everywhere. But
It is due
unfortunately,
to lack of private property rights. After the
Yep.
establishment of Turkish Republic,
yes,
the properties of wakfs
Yeah.
were grasped by
Yes.
the government.
yes.
And there is a directorate of wakf after some time. That directorate started redistributing their own properties back to the wakfs.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Recently gave back to the non-Muslim budget.
Just 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Just
Please.
I was taking from the last point why Saudi Arabia doesn't have waqf system, even though they have a ministry called Wazarat al-Awqaf, Islamic. Simply because the Mamlaka al-Arabiya Saudiya, its official madhab or school of thought is Hanbali. They are al-Ahnaf. The Seljuk, al-Uthmani, al-Abbasi, or Abbasi, Seljuk and Ottomans, you know that they have the Hanafi madhab. The Hanafi madhab is the most flexible school of thought with the question of awqaf. So the thing here is not simply a decision of a government or a political system or whatever. It's very deeply rooted in fiqh and usul al-ahkam. So Ahnaf have a very flexible system of awqaf. You can make waqf, first of all, waqf according to once the waqif, the person who started the waqf, who initiated it or established it, dies, it stops. It can end. Like the thing or the land or the building can go back to the ownership. While the jumhur, the majority of scholars, are very strict in that. So they say, even the Malikis, for example, say if you mention or you intend to start a waqf, you are forced to fulfill your waqf. So this explains to some extent, according to, I cannot go into deep into details of the Shafi'iyya, Hanabila, and Malikiyya, why waqf is very hard to initiate, to start. It to some extent explains why Arab countries, North Africa and African countries don't have awqaf. And most of the awqaf in North Africa are Ottomans. Like up till now we still have awqaf, just because the Ottomans came there and they started the awqaf. Otherwise the Malikis wouldn't start a waqf just per se, because they call it mulzim, aqdul mulzim. It's forced, or if you just intend it, you must fulfill it. If you say it, you must fulfill it. So there are a lot of jurisprudential details which have a strong influence on the issues.
Thank you. Any more comments? Yalasa?
Okay, waqfs and charity are important. Something that we need to discover. I would like to say, after a period of promotion of and praising nation states, welfare states, now we are living in these modern times, and in our Muslim societies, okay, we have to revive the Ansar mentality, but we need to revive the understanding of open society. I mean, immigration has been the given thing all throughout the human civilization. In all, I mean, who are the locals? Who are the locals in Turkey? Let's say, those people who claim to be locals have immigrated to Anatolia like 200 years ago, and they are critical with Syrian immigrants now. They have just immigrated 200 years ago. Let's say Caucasians perhaps, or they have immigrated from Balkans. Now they criticize Syrian immigrants or Afghan immigrants in Turkey. So we need to discuss more about diversity, open society, how civilizations have emerged in our Muslim societies. And I think Ansar concept is not enough. We need to go beyond that Ansar, because that Ansar concept is for a period of time. For how long that person is going to be a refugee. So we need to integrate those refugees, those immigrants in the society. So we need a system, a legal system, which remove the barriers before doing business, so that those immigrants will integrate in the society.
Okay. Thank you so much. The coffee is getting colder. Yeah, and we have so many open questions. Mr. Admir will be on the next session. So.